And hello, everybody. It is another Tuesday edition of our Resilience Lunch and Learn. I am Dave Buzanko, your host as always for this broadcast. And today we have a fantastic guest that's going to be joining us to have a great, lively discussion. He's a fellow resilience coach. He's also a fellow triathlete. And who doesn't love another fellow triathlete on the conversation? So we're going to get you wound up today with a lot of great conversation. My guest is Julian Roberts. Julian is from Hamburg in the UK. He has a very rich history in the corporate environment, working for companies like Kraft Heinz and General Mills. And in 2017, something went off with Julian, and he decided that he wanted to become a leadership coach and a resilience coach. He is the co-host of a podcast called Coaching Conversations, and he's got his master's degree in psychology. So he's going to pin us all to the wall with some great psych talk today, I think. But again, I think we met because of mutual friends who introduced us as resilience coaches. And I think it's awesome to be able to get on the call with another resilience coach, pick each other's brains, have lively conversations. And if you have any questions for Julian or myself today, please feel free to drop those into the chat. Let me know where you are, where you're watching from. If you've got questions, I'll bring them into the conversation. I'll bring them on screen, and we'll be able to answer those live here on the show. So without further ado, let me just bring in Julian to the show. And there's Julian. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Dave. Good to see you. It's good to be on here. Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate this. Looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
And we appreciate having you here. Julian, why don't you just pick up where I sort of left off in the introduction? You were you were working in the corporate world with some pretty major brands, and something clicked for you in 2016, and you decided you were going to become a coach. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey to start with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I had a moment during a sort of job where I decided to sort of reflect on my 20 years within sort of corporate world. I was working in the sort of sales and marketing environments, enjoyed it, loved leading teams. But I started to realize over those 20 years, I got more excited when I saw one of my team do something amazing through my intervention, through their behavioral changes, and actually start to unlock their potential and actually just winning with clients itself. So I started to realize I love people. I love seeing people's potential being maximized and optimized. And so I decided, do you know what? I think that sounds like a coach to me. That's what coaches do. And so then I set on my journey, set my own business up. I made a jump from the world of the corporate world, a very brave jump, having 20 years of nice safety and comfortableness and everything, healthcare and all that sort of stuff. Jumped out, set up my own business, my own practice. Initially, I set up doing sort of helping companies with strategy and business side of things because of my business background. And then I trained as a qualified ICF coach, and then started to build my practice, working with organizations and through that individuals as well. So I love it. Every day is a new day of learning. Every day is exciting, and not that it comes without any challenges, I'm sure, as we all know, being an entrepreneur. So yeah, there we are. That's my pottage history in a very few minutes.
Well, what's interesting to me is that not only do you have a background in sales and marketing, which is huge for anybody who wants to get into the coaching world, because that's part and parcel. You might think you're a great coach, but unless you understand the whole business background behind it, it can be a really frustrating experience. And I'm fearful for a lot of people who have been let go over the course of 2020, who have found it difficult trying to find a new job and thought, well, maybe I'll just take my 10 or 20 years and go into the coaching world. And there's just so much more to it than just being a good coach. There's the whole business side of it that people just, I mean, the worst thing for me was always chasing money. You do the job, you do the work, you do a good job, and all of a sudden, now you're chasing somebody for payment. That doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen.
I've learned that I take upfront fees before I do anything. It's the best way. It really is.
Some lessons are harder to learn than others.
Exactly.
Well, what was interesting was you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about our mutual experience becoming coaches. And you just sort of touched on it with the idea that you are taking additional certification to become a more qualified coach. And I think one of the things that we talked about was the difference between being a coach and sometimes a mental health care professional, which people need something immediately. I always use the metaphor, when you're drowning, you don't need a swim coach, you need a lifeguard. Maybe you can share some stories about your coaching experience and the difference between just being a coach and being sort of a mental health care professional. How do you draw the line between the two?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave. And I found, when you get into a coaching conversation with somebody and over a number of weeks and you build a relationship with people and people get incredibly vulnerable, incredibly open, and there's a great bond. And that's obviously the sort of the beauty of coaching, and people will really learn and really go places when they sort of let go in that sense. Now, often I've got into situations where somebody I've been coaching actually has triggered perhaps a trauma or triggered something in the past, some sort of thing that would actually be more of a mental health. And as much as I can recognize it, and I had one individual who had some, I don't know, series of anxiety over years that sort of popped out of the coaching after a number of sessions. And so I decided and said to them, as much as I could recognize it, and that was great, and we were sort of trying to carry on with the goals and the outcomes they wanted to do, I then suggested that they go and see somebody a bit more about that, who was more trained, more skilled in that area, and who could, because coaching is not about the historical, like what a psychotherapist would do. And I know psychotherapy does take things to the future, but they start at the historical. As a coach, we're always looking at the future focus, positive goals. And I guess I've been in a situation, and I said to the individual, go and see somebody who will really be able to help you here. And we put our sessions on pause, and they went off and sought some professional help as a psychotherapist that could really have a genuine, more impactful intervention and professional intervention, who's skilled in the area as well.
I also had a similar experience with an individual, not in a coaching practice, but in a personal sense, where one of my very close person that I know was experiencing severe panic attacks a couple months ago. And in going over and trying to do everything that I thought was the appropriate thing to do, I really quickly realized how out of depth that I was in that moment. And she needed a lifeguard, not a coach. Yeah. And we got on the phone, we called 911, and the mental health professionals came in. And wow, was it ever a learning experience for both of us?
So that was a real emergency type intervention.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Okay. Right.
And so I didn't realize these resources existed. So even from a coaching standpoint, being able to go through a crisis with somebody, and now being able to tell the story, it's okay. Like it's okay. People have these situations happen to them. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's now I know how to get the appropriate help for that person, because at that moment they're drowning, right? Yes. You don't need a coach, they're drowning and they need help. So how do you get them the right kind of help? So I think that there's just all these moments in time when as a coach, we're asked to do certain things, and we need to understand what is within our scope and what is outside of our scope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the difficulty is, and this is all the coaches I've spoken to, coaches want to help people. That's the sort of general thing. They want to help people achieve their goals and achieve their outcomes. That's why they're doing it. That's why they enjoy it. And I think they get caught up in this, I can help them navigate through this and somehow do this. And almost the sense of stopping and pausing and pointing them to another professional feels like failure. But actually, it is more than failure. It's absolutely a positive thing. And actually, that person will probably thank you for that and come back to you and tell the people, this guy said, no, let's stop for a minute. I sought some professional help and I went back to him when I was in a better place. And I think that's where we need to have those clear boundaries when we're having that sort of those coaching sessions with people, because people do get incredibly open with you in those sessions.
Absolutely. Now, I know we were looking at, I was talking about in the news this week, I shared an article with you. I'm going to pull up a quote here from it. Josh Burson had put out an article last week, and it really resonated with me. And if you were following along yesterday, I had made reference to this quote in my daily LinkedIn post, and I had quite a robust conversation happening around this. And the report itself wasn't necessarily on the state of resilience in organizations, and I think you made a good reference point about that. But it was the sheer acknowledgement or the thought that we as organizations have learned how to build resilient companies, resilient teams, and resilient personal lives. That word "learned" indicates that we've done this thing and we've moved on. I've got the T-shirt. I moved on. No. And I think that's what resonated with me so much. And I got riled up, and a bunch of other folks got riled up, and we started having these lively conversations. What are you seeing? Like, do you agree with that statement? Do you think that there's lots still to be learned? Have we all settled into a really comfortable place now? I mean,
Oh, no. We have certainly not arrived. It's interesting because I did a survey last year for my company and asking over 100 HR leaders about how have their organizations got more resilient due to the COVID impacts. And because we know that, obviously resilience is a skill, and that skill is only sort of utilized when you're faced with that challenge or issue or dilemma or COVID or whatever it may be. And it's interesting, in the year on year, a lot of HR said they had slightly ticked up in terms of their resilience in their organization, which is really good, really positive. And I think there's a recognition that resilience is important, and they're being more resilient because they're faced with something. So it almost created the opportunity to employ those skills. However, what I think though, and this was interesting, how some part of the survey said less than a third were investing in training for resilience. And not that you can measure a company and how resilient they are as such. I think it's great that we're moving forward, great that it's more apparent and more aware, but I think we've got a whole host more places to go with it. And the fact that some people are saying only a third would recognize having somebody come and train and input into that. So we have got some way to go. And I think we need to continue to build people and organizations to make them more resilient and make their resilient cultures that will navigate I'm not just talking COVID and pandemic, I'm talking beyond, because reality is we will always be faced with uncertainty, whether it's on a personal or organizational. Yes, we've been all hit by a massive thing, but that will still continue. So it's not just for the here and now, this is for the long-term sustainable view. And so we've got some way to go yet.
it's about sustainability, and I know on your LinkedIn homepage you use the word thrive, which I use all the time. You're trying to help corporations learn how to thrive, and in my mind, resilience isn't just coming back to where you were. It's absolutely learning from that experience and thriving and moving forward. Yeah. And as an Ironman triathlete, which I know you are, I bring all this back to the training that I learned as an Ironman, and how we look at our annual training plan. How, like, we have a plan, it's a playbook, it's a recipe. How do I get from where I am today to where I want to be? I know there's going to be lots of struggle along the way, and I know I'm going to have to develop new confidence and competencies in areas that I have no clue what that's about right now. And I've just seen how that recipe plays out in the business world, in personal lives. It just continues to replicate and replicate. So I have this thing that I call a resilience playbook. And it's simply taking everything that's top of mind for me, that's important to me, and making it obvious to myself every day, using the science of habit building to keep those things top of mind so they don't fall into the back burner, so that I invest in those things every day. And so I start to feel more resilient because I'm developing those competencies. Do you see in your practice, do you use any form of a playbook, or how do you help your clients develop more resilience in their lives, in all the aspects of their lives that are important?
Yeah, there's a number of ways I do. I mean, for me, resilience is, I suppose, it's trying to create, and it goes back to this sustainability piece. What I try and do in everything I do with myself or with my clients is create something that is long lasting, and something that will change behaviors, and something that will keep them going. Because fundamentally, coaching training is an intervention. It's not a long-term thing. And so I want to have an impact that goes away, and they'll continue to be more resilient, more agile. And whether that's in a personal life, business life, it transcends all things. And so I always get back to a real core principle. And this is a bit of a mindset, really. And this is how I help clients fundamentally, really, is getting back to this thing. And I pin it all onto purpose. And there's a lot of talk about purpose, and I think it's really important to know and why purpose is really important. Not only does it motivate you, it excites you, and all those things that we know, the why of our lives, but purpose, whether individually or purpose in an organization, call it a mission statement, vision statement, however you want to play it, is vital. And it becomes a real guiding light, and it becomes a real anchor point to base everything on, because you're always going to face some sort of obstacle, and some challenge, whether that's, I say, daily or within your business in that context. But if you know, and it's just like Ironman training, we've both been there where we've had those really rubbish training days where you're thinking, I can't do this, I've got no chance. Or even when you're in the race itself, when you are faced with and I know myself, my own personal thing, faced with that 5:30 in the morning, the hooter sounds, and we all start swimming, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? I've got like, whatever, I did it in 15 hours. It's not very quick, but I've got a whole day, and it was the hottest day that year for me. But my overall purpose that day predominantly was to complete the Ironman that in the 17 hours, which is the cutoff time. That was my goal. I had a goal to get under 14 hours. That soon went, but that's fine. But my overall purpose. And so at those points, when I got out the swimming, and bear with me if I keep talking too much, but when I got out the swimming, I got massive lot of cramp. But I thought, no, I'm going to keep going. I was in agony, because my legs had not been moving as much as I liked. It's got on the bike, and then, through the second lap, and it was boiling hot. My legs were burning. I was feeling really tired, really exhausted. I just kept reminding myself, my purpose today is to complete this Ironman, no matter what. Yes, I'm going to face struggles here. How can I help hydrate myself? How can I keep nutrition going? Do I need to just stop for a minute and have a bit of a rest, just clear my mind, and just calm down a little bit and not get so anxious about things? I have other people cheering me on, which was just great. And then you get off your bike, you go and change, and then again you're thinking, wow, I've got to do a marathon now. This is just crazy, absolutely crazy. And it's interesting, and I that's why I never do it again. Although I have done ultra marathons now, which is just equally as bad. But I remember getting on my marathon, and it was the same feeling I had when I did my first marathon in Barcelona at 35 miles. That's how I felt. I felt I had basically 7 miles in me, and literally it was agony. I was cramping, I was hot, I was just absolutely exhausted, but I just kept thinking, no, just keep going, ticking away, and sometimes just zoning out a little bit. And so that's why purpose for me, and having clarity on that purpose, is really anchored into that you will get, something will come in the way. A boulder on a way up to a mountain will get in the way, and you will think of the ways to be creative, innovative, work with teams to do that. And that's how you can galvanize teams with it. So that's what roots me in really well.
What's really interesting in what you said there is your vision on that day was to get to the finish line. And I know that the mantra of Ironman is your first and only goal is to get to the finish line. And then what's interesting is that, you can finish that race in 18 hours, or you can finish that race in 8 hours. Everybody's going out and doing the similar type of training, but there's differences in the training that cause the improvements to have you finish that race in 8 hours versus 18, right? So even though people are going out and going through the motions to improve their life, there's many different recipes. Just like there's many different recipes to make a chocolate chip cookie or make a cake, there's many different recipes. Some of them will give you the outcome that you're looking for, others will not. And part of having a recipe to follow is managing your expectations. I think for me, a lot of resilience that I've learned over the years has been about just developing the confidence and competence in myself in a number of areas of my life that were super important. Like financially, if you're not saving for your future, or you're not learning how to build passive income, you're going to be really unnerved about finances your entire life. That's going to cause stress. That's not going to make you very resilient when you're looking to be your best possible self and you're worried about money all the time.
Yeah.
Health and wellness. If you're not investing in your own health and wellness every day, then you're becoming susceptible to chronic disease and things like COVID coming around, which can have a very negative impact on people who have underlying health conditions, which is chronic disease. So we have the ability to control our own outcomes to a certain degree, manage our risk by making good investments in ourselves every day, the same way we do financially. If you don't invest financially, you won't have anything at the end. If you don't invest in yourself physically, you won't have anything at the end. Mentally, I always say resilience is like a tablecloth. Vision, identity, social proof. It's the tablecloth of those 4 legs of the table. If I'm looking at the table I'm sitting at right now, there's 4 legs. There's a financial leg, there's a physical leg, there's a mental leg, and there's a personal growth leg. And this tablecloth that covers everything is this idea of VIP, vision, identity, and social proof. And again, we can have these we can have in our mind, we want to get to this place, but are you following the right recipes for each one of those legs to get stronger, to get more confident, to become more competent, to thrive, so that you develop that confidence and competence as you get to that place? And you might realize that place might not even be where you thought it was. Like I never expected to go to an Ironman finish line, let alone 3.
After did I?
That wasn't in the cards. But what happened was I paid attention, and I looked at the recipe and I went, well, I didn't come from a perspective of, wow, that was hard, I'll never do that again. I went, wow, that was hard, but how can I be faster? And that was actually something that's really interesting. Tell me if you've ever struggled with happiness, because when you left your job in 2016, something must have said to you, I'm not happy here anymore. I'm searching for some happiness. I want to have a greater impact in my life. And that's what I was looking for. And I thought when I crossed that first Ironman finish line that some sort of signal would tell me that I'm going to be happy now. And literally, I remember I've got a picture of me turning around looking at the clock. With my first time was like just under 14 hours, thinking 14 hours, how can I be faster? Like I wasn't happy for 5 seconds. Immediately,
no, interesting. I was probably a bit sort of like not flat, but a little bit like, is that it? I was expecting actually something different in terms of the feeling, in the sense of that, because I know when I finished my first marathon, I was like massively high on a kite. I literally was. I felt absolutely high on everything going on in me. But my Ironman was a little bit like, all right, okay, is that it? And then it was just a little bit, because there's more to life than just clearly an Ironman, and that's not my purpose in life, is to do Ironmans or ultras. It's just part of what I do, and I think it builds resilience in terms of mental and physical sort of part of the training as well. But I think it's sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I heard this one quote once, do what makes your heart sing. You don't have to do Ironmans. It just I love it. I love the training. I've always loved the practice aspect of sport. I've really, that to me, that's meditative, to be able to go out and pound away for hours on the road or on the bike or, in the water. I find it very, very soothing. So do what makes your heart sing, and just do it in a way that's going to give you the outcome that you want to have 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. Like just try to be aware of the recipe you're following, and try to understand what the outcome is, what the vision is that you want to create. And then just, again, when I talk about personal growth, that's your agile decision-making process. That is asking yourself, is this thing that I'm doing going to serve me in the long run? A really good example of that was, my first Ironman was 14 hours. My second Ironman was 11 hours and 27 minutes. There's a huge change in time there.
Massive.
I said to myself, okay, if I want to get to the World Championships, I got to shave more time off. And while that was happening, my father was actually dying from complications from dementia. And I sat down and talked to his neurologist, and we had a really interesting conversation. And they said to me, crosswords are for entertainment, exercise is brain food. And I took that to heart. And then I started realizing and doing the research. And when you dig into it deeper, you realize there's something called BDNF. What's BDNF? Brain-derived neurotrophic factors. That is the miracle grow for new brain cells in your hippocampus, which is where Alzheimer's and dementia basically destroy. Yeah. So the funny thing is, science right now is showing that you get the most benefit when you're aerobic and about 70% of your maximum heart rate. That's where you get the maximum benefit from BDNF. Now, if I'm training to get to the World Championships, I've got to train closer to my lactate threshold. I've got to keep training to push that so I can go faster and harder. So all of those hours of training, you might go, wow, that guy's bulletproof. He's doing all this hard work. Look at him. Look at that athlete. I'm doing nothing for my brain, which when I'm 40, the worst thing that could ever happen to you, my father was a fit person. Yeah. The worst thing that could ever happen is a fit body with a brain that's mush in a nursing home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you never, that heart could keep ticking for another 10 years. And that's so not right. Like, so I've got this mixed bag of experiences, and I'm just trying to share with people, like the statistics are not in our favor if you're not helping your own self. That you're not going to end up with some sort of need of assisted living. And you don't want to find yourself in that position if you can help it. So being resilient maybe is about being resilient in all four legs, so that you're financially capable, you're physically fit, you're growing mentally and challenging yourself every day, and you're challenging your belief system.
Well, I think resilience creates this mindset that looks for these opportunities. It looks for ways of, whether it's creating an exercise regime to keep you fit and and sort of, sometimes you going for a run can really help de-stress you. It can make you think, get clarity, all that sort of stuff. We know that in sort of reflecting is really powerful as well. So I think the whole resilience piece and having a resilience mindset starts to make you not just the agility and overcoming things, which is obviously really good, but I think you start to see life and see what really matters as well, and start to get a really perspective on things. And I know as I've done more resilience training and as I engage with my clients, I start to look at what I'm doing as well, because obviously at the end of the day, I've got to start to be more adaptive to that. And, and going back to that whole what makes you happy, me hitting my purpose, which is unlocking people's potential. Ultimately, that's what I do. I get off a coaching call and I'm buzzing. I might have been exhausted getting on it, but actually when I see people with lights going on and going, I did this and this, or getting feedback from their bosses that they're doing some amazing things now, and just from my intervention, that really excites me, and that's what motivates me. But it also goes into not only my coaching business, but it also goes into my personal life. We've I shared this before. I foster as well, so we foster a child, and part of that is unlocking potential. And I'm not going to be a savior, but we're going to add something that will create a more positive impact on that individual going forward. So again, it goes in all aspects of my life, and even just talking to my friends, I just can't help just seeing opportunities when they talk to me about things in their business and what they're doing, and you just start to see things very differently because you've got a different mindset, and that's really helpful, and that's what keeps me going and motivating, and particularly this tough time as well.
So it does circle back to the question or the idea of having a resilience playbook in my mind, because again, it keeps those things that are important top of mind. And if your goal in your business is to, let's say you've got a measurable goal that you want to hit a certain number in sales or whatever it might be by the end of the year, well, the natural thing to do is to write down, well, how many calls do I have to make? How many new prospects do I need to speak to? And it's just a numbers game at that point. Well, in every area of your life that you want to be resilient in, that's going to make you a holistically resilient person, you have to have the same sort of metrics in place, and you've got to be able to look for that social proof, and you've got to start assuming the identity of the certain type of person that's going to be that person you aspire to be. Otherwise, you're just selling yourself a lot of BS. And that's where I'm fearful right now. And to circle back to the whole beginning of the conversation, I'm fearful that a comment like "we learned" would indicate that we're ready to move beyond that. And from everybody I speak to, nobody's ready to move beyond that. I'm not ready to move beyond that. I'm a resilience coach. There's just so much to be learned.
Yes,
right. And so long as I was a rowing coach for a high school rowing coach for almost 10 years. And you're only as strong as the weakest member in the boat or in the crew. And so when I think of organizations, right, an organization can only be as strong as the weakest member of the team. And how strong could that organization be if everybody knew how to be resilient, and if everybody was being supportive, and if everybody was on the same plan? Hey, maybe your internal lunch and learn is about helping people financially. Let's talk about that for a month. Let's have a financial well-being month. Yeah. Let's have a physical well-being month. Not where we're bringing in yoga mats, but where we're actually talking about it. I've always said, this is a communications problem. This isn't a dietary problem or a physical problem or financial problem. This is a communications problem. And we need to take old stereotypes of what's taboo to talk about and bring it into the foreground and be uncomfortable talking about it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's lesson one as an Ironman.
Exactly.
If you can't handle being uncomfortable, you picked the wrong game to play.
Tell us about it, yes.
Listen, this has been fantastic. I know we've got a bunch of people watching live. Nobody's been brave enough to let me know where they're from yet. If you want to drop in a quick question for Julian or myself, please do so. Otherwise, we're going to be wrapping up in about 5 minutes' time. But do you have any parting thoughts for those people right now who are sitting back, who are maybe watching this on the rebroadcast and thinking to themselves, what's the one thing that I can do to help myself become more resilient in any aspect of my life in 2021? What would be the one starting point?
Well, besides me repeating myself at the start about purpose, that's why I labor that. It's really vital, and you may have whether it's a playbook or a plan of how to achieve things, But unfortunately, as we know along the way, training plans for Ironmans, they go wrong. Because you get injured, you get illness, a whole host of stuff.
And then you adapt.
and you adapt, and it's having that mindset of being able to adapt. And I think it's I always call it, be willing to accept change. Have the willingness to be in a position that you will see things differently or do things differently. Don't go so fixed on how it's going to be done. It doesn't matter really on the how, as long as you can do something differently and it still achieves your purpose. That's okay. And try and work on ways of getting your body, your mind, your whole being open to change. Because the reason people get really stressed when change comes along is because they're not used to it. They get surprised by it, and our natural instinct is to sort of run away from it or fight it, and an emotional response really. And so create opportunities in your life that will get you comfortable with change, as in being uncomfortable, whether that's simple as, instead of running one way one day, run a different way, do a different route. Go and do a trail run that you've never done before. Go and ride somewhere differently. Have a different type of coffee. Have a different type of breakfast. Simple little things start to create a little mindset of doing things differently. Take on a new sport. Take on a new hobby. Start to create this opportunity that you are open to change. And then when you do get something that's a little bit of a shock, you're not so thrown by it, and enables you to bounce back a little bit more. So that's always what I encourage people to do, is just create a little bit more change in your life.
Which again, that for me is personal resilience. It's that agile problem solving perspective where you're going, okay, things are good now, but if you pick your head up, I think if you go through life and your head's down all the time and you're so focused on that vision of where you're trying to get to, if you never pick your head up to look around the edges, that's where the magic happens. Right? You've got to really question sometimes. Things might feel like they're going 1,000,000% in the right direction. Still question it. And if somebody comes along with a new idea, vet out the idea. Be open to change. Be open to discovering new ideas. And I think if you have that healthy growth mindset, that's going to help you become more resilient as a person. People will feel more comfortable approaching you with problems to help you solve those problems. And then you're seen as a leader, right? But just like you said, go right back to the beginning, vision. Have that crystal clear vision, because if you don't have a vision of where you want to get to, and I know that's actually really difficult for a lot of people. I know Simon Sinek, I went through his work program, Find Your Why. And for me, it took me a couple of years really to nail down what my why was. So, and I'm somebody who's keen to learn about this stuff. So that should tell you something, that somebody who's really keen to learn, if it took me 2 years to figure it out, and then with coaching to figure it out from Simon's team. Now, ask yourself this: if you're not keen and you're struggling, boy, that becomes a real difficult conversation to have with people. And really what I found is the best way to do that is just ask somebody, when were you happy in your life? Tell me what that was about. What made you happy in your past? And can we get back to a place like that again in your future? What would that look like? And then, if they can visually describe that for you and you can picture it in your mind's eye, now we've got a place to start from. So being crystal clear on that vision, and being happy about what that place might feel and look like, that gives you the tangibles, right? It's not so removed anymore. And now you can work on, think about how can I make that better every day? How can I work on that person every day? Anyway, Julian, this has been fantastic. I loved getting all the insights that you shared with our audience today. For those of you who have any questions for us that are watching this maybe on the rebroadcast, please know that if you leave any questions in the chat, we will be answering those continuously. So we'll be notified when you do it. Mention us to make sure that we see the mentions. I know I look at them. Julian maybe not so much because he doesn't babysit my content the way that I do. But if you mention him, I'm sure he'll give you be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, Julian, thank you very much for being a guest on our show today. It's been fantastic. I wish you nothing but the very best for 2021. And if you're looking for a resilience coach, this is one of the guys you want to talk to. So with that, thank you very much, Julian.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.